I need to grab... that was my back. Why do you do that? I need to grab something. I'll be right back. I'm back. That is not the best angle, is it? No. Wow, I already got a like. That's great. I forgot to put Tourette's in the description. Hello, first name, last name. Hello. Hello, Sean KCTIV. This is White Peach and Orange Blossom Caress. There's also 2 cups of white vinegar. I need to grab a towel, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. How's everybody doing tonight? Axe Dark Temptation. I've been wearing this since I was 14. Okay. This is the perfect temperature. It's hot, but I can stand it. Oh, what? Okay. I don't know how, but I tied a figure 8 knot. I did not mean to tie a figure 8 knot. I'm just gonna deal with that for now. Oh, it's warm in here. I would open the window to cool it off in here, but it's actually pretty warm outside. Hello, Vlad Bosnata. How is everybody doing tonight?
smart fridges and calculators. But in this case, the researchers whose study we're going to be discussing are literally taking this to the next level because they're now essentially using living human brain cells to play the game. And though this might sound confusing, this is actually a pretty interesting and pretty serious research that's going to help us understand how neural networks work. That's probably also going to help us build much more efficient computers, and more importantly, one day will help us understand various neurological disorders and very likely lead to some major treatments. But first, to understand exactly what this means for all of its symbols, we have to discuss this relatively new concept referred to as brain organoids. Something that actually kind of looks like this. And sometimes these are also known as mini brains, but technically that's a bit of a misnomer. And while normally these are relatively small, three-dimensional blobs of human tissue, typically about the size of a grain of rice, and scientists normally grow them in a lab using a specific procedure with stem cells. They can then be programmed to become any type of a cell inside the body, such as neurons in this case. And they're grown into these tiny structures that, though far from being an actual brain, do possess very similar functions. But I guess the question is, why use this? And why not just simulate all of this? Or maybe rely on some other animal, like for example, well, for one, human brain is just a bit of a black box. Basically, we know very little about it because we don't really experiment with the human brain itself. And so by using actual human brain cells, in this case created in the lab, it actually helps us to study what we want to understand. And though mice and rats are obviously great, they don't really capture the full complexity of the human brain development and do possess slightly different genes that produce slightly different effects. And so in order to understand human-specific features on diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, here, real human neurons are required in order to see what's happening. And at the same time, they actually offer a slightly ethically superior procedure to a lot of different types of animal testing. And that's because in this case, we're not actually killing the rat or the mouse, because in this case, whatever this is, it is not technically alive. These are not alive and are not animals, and only function as long as you keep
Oh, hello
them in
everybody.
the correct environment. But the latest breakthrough when it comes to these brain organoids, startup referred to Cortical Labs, and their new device referred to as
Hello, Olvera.
they describe as silicon meets neuron. And it's basically a machine that looks like this. And what's intriguing about this is that this is technically a biological computer. Here it consists of roughly 200,000 living human brain cells that are grown on very specific silicon chips covered in tiny electrodes, which basically creates a kind of a closed loop, meaning that the computer in this case can directly talk to the cells, in this case using electrical signals, but the cells can also talk back. And in early experiments,
I'm giving myself a pedicure. We're at the part where I soak my feet for like 30 minutes to an hour until the water goes cold, basically. And then I'm going to use a pumice stone and exfoliate my feet. And then I'm going to use what is this? It's covered in dust. Tree Hut Candy Cane Shea Sugar Scrub. And I think I have a foot mask. I'm not sure what ingredients go in a foot mask as opposed to a face mask, but I bought it, so I might as well use it. But yeah, I'm just soaking my feet at this point. I'm watching videos to pass the time. This one is about playing a video game on human brain cells. And it's not fiction.
these cells learn how to play Pong. And though impressive, it's still kind of simple because this is just a two-dimensional game without any meaningful complexity. And so this time researchers decided to move on to something a little bit more complex. Something you can find on those smart fridges. They basically tried Doom. Although here I guess one question is, why Doom? Well, obviously it's because, first of all, it's a lot more complex than Pong. It requires the understanding of three-dimensional environment. It requires interactions with enemies and a lot of different items. And most importantly, it requires a constant decision making, including things like movement and firing weapons, which is something scientists refer to as goal-directed learning. And so here the digital environment of this video game was converted into specific electrical patterns that would then stimulate the neurons on those chips. And so for example, if there's an enemy somewhere, these specific electrodes will fire, letting those neurons know that something has to be done. And in response,
I feel like what they did is create a new form of consciousness that's never been created before.
the neurons then fire their own electrical spikes, which the system then translates into some kind of a command like fire your gun or turn left, turn right, walk forward. And while initially the brain cells were pretty bad, they walked into walls, they fired randomly, and they started spinning in circles. But over time they started to show signs of learning, eventually targeting enemies much more regularly, and basically proving that even a tiny clump of neuronal matter can adapt to various stimuli in real time, which is actually a pretty intriguing discovery and a pretty intriguing achievement. But this also builds on a kind of a history of using Doom for biological studies, where animals were also used for these very similar studies in order to understand the idea of learning. Well, one of the most famous studies actually being by Victor Toth. You can find his channel and the video about this in the description below. And so here this researcher built a custom virtual reality rig for his tiny rats, and their goal was to play Doom 2. Here the rat would sit on a polystyrene ball that acted as a treadmill, and as it moved, the character in the game moved as well. And so in this case, the rats basically learned how to interact with the game through this virtual rig. Although obviously, even though they learned to pull the lever to fire at demons, they didn't necessarily understand what the game is about and what they were doing. In that sense, they were just performing the tasks in order to acquire rewards. And so in contrast, the organoid experiments are quite different because they're looking at how the neural networks organize themselves and how they learn without a full body and a full survival instinct. And so basically the idea of using Doom for some kind of a learning experiment is not something that's new. But another recent experiment has also used these brain organoids to demonstrate a solution to a different problem, a classical engineering challenge that involves balancing an unstable virtual stick on a cart. This is usually done by moving the cart forwards and backwards. And so here scientists found that when they provided adaptive feedback, or basically a mechanism that gave cells a little electrical jolt when they were doing something wrong, these organoids improved their efficiency quite dramatically. They were actually approximately 46% successful following these electrical jolts, but without feedback, only 2% were successful. Although the more important question here is, of course, so why is this actually important? Well, this is important for a lot of different fields. The first reason is energy efficiency. And that's because compared to any computer or any AI out there, human brain is just incredibly efficient. And it's also very powerful. It only runs on about 20 watts of power, which is actually equivalent to an extremely dim light bulb. In contrast, something like ChatGPT requires massive server farms, an incredible amount of electricity to perform similar tasks. And so if we can actually find a way to create a biological computer, we might be able to do something way more efficiently. But a much more important reason right now is, of course, healthcare and drug discovery. Because the system uses real human neurons, scientists can now directly test different medicines in order to see the effects on the brain function right away. As a matter of fact, here in the future, it might even be possible to create a personalized test using the neurons from the person that needs to be treated, and then seeing the effects of different types of medicine on the neurons that basically look like this. In this case, this will be created by using the patient's blood or skin cells, turning them into stem cells, and then growing them into these tiny brains. But for other fields, including different computer science fields, this is also a step forward for the idea referred to as synthetic biological intelligence, or basically the idea that could one day lead to these hybrid computers that combine the speed of silicon with the flexibility and learning power of a biological brain. Although just as a side note, I also have to mention that right now, we are pretty certain that these are not conscious. In other words, they don't have thoughts, emotions, or memories, because unlike a human brain, they do not contain specific structures and are not actively thinking about, for example,
Okay, that's good.
in Doom. The only function when there's some kind of interaction with, for example, the silicon chip, and they only produce extremely simple interactions. So basically, these are simple clusters of cells responding to electrical patterns. And so here we're not creating a real brain in a petri dish. But the fact that this tiny piece of matter can actually navigate a video game from 30 years ago is a pretty massive discovery, which essentially shows us that this idea of learning and intelligence seems to be a kind of a unique property that arises in all neural networks when they're provided with the right kind of feedback. But in terms of the actual implications, and of course, in terms of what this is going to be used for, we don't really know. These are all brand new studies, and there are not a lot of discoveries yet. On that note, once we learn something else, we'll come back and discuss this in some of the future videos. Until then, thank you for watching, subscribe, come back tomorrow to learn something else. Support this channel Patreon, working for additional videos without any ads, and can name it directly, or by joining channel membership that grants you early access. You can also support this channel.
People think, therapy can't help me. What's going to therapy going to do for me? There's such a parallel between the relationship.
I just want to talk briefly today about 7 types of rest. Well, 6 months ago, I came across the book by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith called Sacred Rest. And then I thought this was an excellent concept to people aware of, especially people from complex trauma, that there's different types of rest. And I think why it's so significant is because as I work with people, one of the things that they quickly try to learn in recovery is self-care. And part of self-care is learning to rest. And so they develop ways of self-care. And what they find is it seems to help a little bit, but they still feel quite tired all the time. And part of them just feels exhausted. And so they go, why is this self-care not working? And so really it's because the self-care is maybe only focusing on one type of rest, and it's not including all the other types of rest. So I want to talk about these 7 types of rest just briefly. But before I do, let me just give you a couple background important concepts that I think are really important to kind of factor into your thinking. So the first is there's different types of energy expenditure. So we usually, when we think of getting tired, we think of getting physically tired. We worked hard, we expended energy physically, that makes us tired. But there's also the expending of emotional energy. So it takes a lot of energy to grieve, to go through therapy where you work on very painful trauma and emotions. It takes a lot of energy to be in conflict, to experience anger, to experience painful emotions, to even experience positive emotions takes energy, to experience empathy takes energy. And so there's an emotional tiredness that comes out of expending emotional energy. And then there's a tiredness that comes out of thinking a lot. We know that the brain uses about 1/3 of the calories a day that we burn. And so the brain requires a lot of energy in order to think. And so if you're in a very intense thinking situation, you end up very tired. So you have physical exertion, emotional exertion, then you got intellectual exertion. But then a person who's in survival mode, who's feeling constant danger, whose stress system is always activated, who's always on guard, who can't fully relax, that takes a lot of energy. That takes constant energy. But there's one other area here that I want you to think about. Do you realize that even doing good things like meeting your 12 needs requires energy? So if you're going to maintain healthy relationships and love and communicate and be authentic and care and nurture, that takes energy. If you're going to build friendships, that takes energy. Meeting a need, it's very rewarding, but still it takes energy. It can be tiring. If you're going to fulfill your purpose needs, and so you're helping out, you're involved in following up on your passion, that's a very positive thing, but it takes energy. And so what I want you to see is that even doing all the right things takes energy. And so we get tired from even doing the right things. So I hope what you're also seeing here is that if you kind of picture different gas tanks, so you've got a physical exertion gas tank, you got an intellectual exertion gas tank, you got an emotional gas tank, you've got a social gas tank. So we got kind of different sources of the energy that we need, different gas tanks. So what I think happens for a lot of people is when they do self-care, they fill the physical gas tank back up, but they don't fill the emotional gas tank or the intellectual gas tank. So they feel somewhat rested, but not totally rested or rejuvenated. And so it's realizing that to do healthy self-care, I gotta fill all of the gas tanks. And that's what I want to talk about. And so the 7 types of rest that are talked about, and I think is just important to make the distinctions. It's number 1, physical rest. So it's rest for your body, but that includes both active and passive forms of rest. So if you think of kind of passive rest, that's where you take a nap. That's where you have a sleep. But it's really important to understand that for sleep to be really rejuvenating, yes, little naps, sketchy sleep is okay, but you need some really deep, good sleep for an extended period of time. But then there's active forms of rest. So getting a massage, doing yoga, stretching, going for a leisurely walk, engaging in a very therapeutic, relaxing hobby. All of those are forms of physical rest. So what are some of the signs that your physical gas tank is getting low, that you're needing the physical type of rest? So you're just constantly tired, you have body aches, and all of a sudden you're relying on caffeine to give you energy because you just don't have it. So those are some of the signs. Then there's mental rest. So you get intellectually exhausted. You need to give your brain a break. It's been thinking too much. You've had information overload, and now you're finding that you are having trouble making decisions because your just brain is so foggy. And so you need short mental breaks where throughout the day you think hard, but then you just get up and walk around. You just take a break, let your brain relax. Some people also find a form of intellectual rest is journaling, where they just kind of dump all of the stuff in their brain out so they don't have to think about it anymore. So any fears, any plans, any decisions that have to be made, just get it all on paper, then it's kind of dumped from your brain. Then others find daily mindfulness and meditation, taking time to just quiet your brain, taking time to regulate your brain is such an important part of intellectual rest. We also know that a good deep sleep is very important for helping the brain rest. And then for many people, they just need to learn very practical boundaries around turning the notifications off on their phone so that they're not constantly
I'm
checking
using,
their phone, not looking at emails from work.
I'm using Equate Mini Nicotine Lozenges in the strength 4 milligrams. I gotta be careful not to let the juices from this touch my toothache. Otherwise, it will burn from experience. I'll just put it back in my pocket. And then I have a nicotine-free vape from Ripple.
In the evening. So you just have boundaries so that you're not constantly entering into a new intellectual endeavor. So what are the signs that maybe you're getting intellectually fatigued? You're having difficulty concentrating. You're forgetting stuff. You feel a bit of a brain fog and have trouble concentrating, making decisions. Those are very important to be aware of.
I am stuck on level 13 on the ability. I cannot find all the cats. I've only found 2 so far, and
The third is emotional rest. And that's when my emotional gas tank is just exhausted. And so some of the signs of that is that you just feel emotionally numb, or you cry at the drop of a hat, or you get dysregulated emotionally very easily, or you're just feeling robotic, like you're burnt out emotionally. You have nothing there. You've held everything in and you just can't do it anymore. So what you're doing with emotional rest is you're giving yourself permission to be authentic emotionally, to feel your feelings without fear of judgment or burdening others. So how do you gain emotional rest? Number one, you got to be around safe, validating people if you're around people. Secondly, you probably need some therapy or counseling where you can talk about your emotions, you can process your emotions. That helps you resolve some of the emotions so that they're not just building up inside of you. You need to be able to find safe spaces for yourself where you can honestly express your emotions privately. Have a good cry, journal, or express them with a friend and have just a good talk and cry with a friend. And then you need
That works. Okay. Where did I put the pumice stone? I'm back. Up high above a tree, an eagle I see, soaring in the breeze. Up high above a tree, an eagle I see, soaring in the breeze. Up high above a tree, an eagle I see, soaring in the breeze. Up high above a tree, an eagle I see, soaring in the breeze. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami, maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy may move to Miami and maybe my mommy may not. Maybe my mommy. I think that's about as high as I can go. All of these years, through all of these years, and you say, hold your head up high. Now I ask you, how can I can't tell my pain's fine, or have some that and maybe I can let myself cry for a once. And nothing you say can make it okay. When your jokes sting me day after day. All of my fears both opaque and sheer. And you say, reach for the sky. Now I ask you, how can I? Maybe one day I'll give up and die, or maybe one day I'll learn how to fly. The whispers of your name are crawling through my ears again. I can't live with this pain. The walls are closing in and all I do just seems to be in vain. at this point, I don't think I ever will. And does it matter who lives and dies when all the days are just the same? And honestly, who am I if no one really ever knew my name? I write to you by candlelight and pray to God you're still alive. 'Cause I've got plans to change the world, but I don't think that you'll survive. One day you'll hear my voice again, screaming across the radio. You'll wonder if it's you to whom I sing. I wanna ruin all your favorite songs, remind you of the promises you used to break my heart. I'll never be the same, and I can't help but think that you're to blame. All your lies won't ever make that change. I hope I get better, but at this point, I don't think I ever will. And does it matter who lives and dies when all the days are just the same? And honestly, who am I if no one really ever knew my name? So I'll duck my teeth and I'll cross my eyes and pray to God I live tonight. 'Cause even though you've been gone, I still might turn to dust and bone. All I do just seems to be in vain. Okay. It's hot in here. I don't know why I did that. I'm gonna end the live stream here. If I end up painting my toenails after my feet are fully dry, then I will make a video of it. But I might just skip painting my toenails and I don't know. I might try to sleep, see how painful it is to lay down, and if I manage to fall asleep, then I manage to fall asleep, and if I don't, I will see about doing another live stream, possibly a barrel fire. I will see y'all in the next one. Love you. Bye.